that people are aware. And thank you very much for coming out this evening for the topic, the Saturday Night Seder, an uncommon opportunity. I want to thank Aish Thornhill for inviting me to give the session this evening, and Rabbi Rothman for reaching out. I also want to note my parents. I think this is the first time you're here for a Zoom shiur of mine. So
Yes,
thank you very much for being here. I won't embarrass you at a future one if you come back. And I also want to thank Nathan Kirsch for dedicating the shiur this evening in honor of, well, fine, me and the entire Beit Midrash, wishing them and their families and the entire community a safe and healthy Chag Pesach Sameach. So thank you very much, Nathan. I also want to remind people that our Beit Midrash has quite a bit of pre-Pesach programming going on. And if you take a look on the source sheet, which again, I put the link in the chat for you, you'll see I gave you a link at the top for general pre-Pesach materials, where you can find all sorts of pre-Pesach classes, Seder companions, and the like, as well as the link for this coming Monday evening when we will have our second Haggadah night. Haggadah night is a very special opportunity. It's 4 short thoughts for your Seder, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And the whole program should be done in 40 minutes, maybe 45 if we have a technical glitch. But that's coming up on Monday evening. I actually wrote 8 o'clock on there. That's a mistake. It's 8:15. If you join at 8 o'clock though, you know, I don't know, maybe we'll sing and dance, something to entertain you until 8:15. And finally, I put up there as well a fact that I prepared. It's a little guide, brief guide for what to do when Erev Pesach is Shabbos. And that's the perfect lead-in to where we're going here. But I also wanted to make special request for those who are comfortable with it to please turn on their video for the program. I know that, you know, not everybody at night is up to being visible, and you know, that's fine, understood. I'm in my, you know, tie and everything else. You don't have to be. Nonetheless, it's a lot more enjoyable for me when I'm speaking to be able to see people to whom I am speaking. So if you're able to, that's great. So thanks to the double whammy of COVID and this year's calendar, it's really easy to become overwhelmed facing this Pesach, right? We have to prepare all of the Seder fixings on Friday. We have questions like when we're supposed to destroy the chametz and how we're supposed to destroy the chametz. What do we eat for bread at the first 2 meals of Shabbos? What about for Shalosh Hodes? How do we have Shalosh Hodes? It's all, you know, it is challenging. It's something that hasn't happened in a while. Last time was 2008. But you might want to get used to it, because assuming that when Mashiach comes, we don't radically change the calendar, this is happening again in, I think it's 2024 or 2025. So, you know, keep your notes from this year. It's something that we'll be revisiting. What I want to do this evening is talk about this year's calendar in a different way. Because instead of saying, oh no, Erev Pesach is Shabbos, I actually want us to come out of this saying, oh yes, Erev Pesach is Shabbos. This is a wonderful opportunity. You tell me, what are the benefits that you see in having the day before Pesach be Shabbos? What do you see?
Shabbos Shluf.
Ah, good. So Rhonda says right off the bat, Shabbos Shluf. It's an opportunity for a nap. That's not a small thing. You know, when do you ever get a chance to take a nap on Erev Pesach? So I definitely consider that to be like number 1 on the list. Almost so much so that like there is no number 2, but there are other benefits to having this year's Luach. What else?
Prepare spiritually. One has an opportunity to read and prepare.
So Dov says to read and prepare. There is a practice of reading the Haggadah on Shabbos Haggadol, Shabbos before Pesach. However, in a normal year, when you have a few days between that Shabbos and Pesach, number 1, whatever you read on Shabbos is ancient history. We don't remember things that well for that long a period of time, and it doesn't have the intensity of reading it on Shabbos afternoon when you know you're going to have a Seder that night. So the practice of learning the Haggadah, or part of the Magid really, on that Shabbos is, I think, important as well. Good. Another element that I think is valuable is in terms of children. so much of what we do at the Seder is, as we say in the Hebrew, Kadesha Yishalu Hatinokos, so that children will ask questions. Well, this year, even the most jaded child who is familiar with Pesach is going to see a whole lot of things they have not seen before, because the last time this happened was 13 years ago. So in terms of all the preparations and strange things that are going to go on, I don't know what Aish Thornhill is planning on doing Shabbos morning before Pesach, but many shuls are going to be davening very early and then having people eat their first meal Shabbos morning and then have a 20-minute break and then eat their shalashudas on Shabbos morning. Like, they're going to see some things they have not seen before. It will get children into that mood to investigate and find out what's going on. So there are certain, I think, very clear practical benefits to the calendar as it is. But I want to go beyond that. And I want to start with a concept that is called in Hebrew neshamah yisera, or neshamah yetera, if you will. Either way means the same thing. And I want to take a poll, because ever since I learned how to do polls on Zoom, I've really enjoyed it. So I'm going to launch a poll here, which is anonymous, so people can answer without fear of being identified. I'm launching the poll now. This is multiple choice. You can answer as many as you like. What is a neshamah yetera? Literally an extra soul. Is it a natural consequence of halting our work on Shabbat? Therefore, we have an extra soul. Is it an actual extra soul we receive on Shabbat? Is it a supernatural ability to eat on Shabbat without gaining weight? I'm not sure. Never heard of it. Don't know what you're talking about, Rabbi. You tell me. I'll give it another 10 seconds for people to answer. I learned
you forgot all of the above.
I didn't give you, well, you can check off as many boxes as you like. You can check off all the boxes. I did this for I did a poll for a different lesson once, and I gave people a hint of where things were leading, and then I was told you're not allowed to do that, not till the polls are closed. So I'm going to end polling, and I will share the results so that people can see. So we have 13% of respondents are saying a natural consequence of halting our work on Shabbat, 4 people. Then you got 25 people saying it's an extra soul we receive on Shabbat, an actual extra soul. We have 1 person saying it's a supernatural ability to eat on Shabbat without gaining weight. I thought that one was going to get more traction. 1 person saying not sure, another 3 saying never heard of it. Okay, so we have a range of answers to this question. And the truth of the matter is, I've heard all of them said, including, I don't know what you're talking about. So first of all, no, it's not about eating on Shabbat without gaining weight. Nonetheless, it does have some remarkable qualities. Take a look, please, on the source sheet. And for those who have come in the last couple of minutes, I'm posting the link for the source sheet in the chat again. I don't like sharing the source sheet on Zoom because then I can't see you, and that makes it harder to speak. So if you can click on the link, you'll be able to download it. If you're not sure how to download it, when you click on the link and it opens up, you'll in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a down arrow, and click on the down arrow, and that's how you download it. So if you take a look at the first source there, it's a Gemara in Beit. The Gemara says, Neshamah yisera nosein HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'adam Erev Shabbos. On Erev Shabbos, on Friday, God puts an extra soul into a person. U'l'motzai Shabbos not l'nosa himenu. And after Shabbos is over, it's taken away. Where does this come from? How does the Gemara say that? Because the pasuk says, "Shneimar Shavas vayinafash." We just read that in the Torah in Parshas Kisisa, that on the 7th day Hashem halted and vayinafash. Vayinafash is a really strange word. It doesn't lend itself to easy translation, and the Gemara here says, don't translate it at all. Instead, read vayinafash as a sort of compound. Vay nefesh. Vay is like whoa, oi. Of the nefesh is lost. The nefesh, the soul, meaning the extra soul, is lost once the halting of Shabbat is over. So from this, the Gemara says, during Shabbos, there's an extra nefesh or neshamah. True Kabbalists will know there's a difference between a nefesh and a neshamah. Fortunately, the 46 people who are here are not Kabbalists, and therefore we're not going to worry about the business of what a nefesh is versus a neshamah. We're going to pretend they're all the same. And what we're trying to say with a message that's coming across here from the Gemara is that there is an extra soul that a person has on Shabbos. Interesting question. Once we're dealing with souls, when exactly does it arrive? And the answer is there's some debate on this score. If you take a look at source number 2, I just gave you some bullet points. I wasn't going to drag out all the texts. But one view is it arrives on Friday after midday. So it's an early arrival there. Another view is before the Shmona Esrei, before the Amidah at Mariv on Friday night. A third view, the Gemara talks about 2 malachim, 2 angels, who come to visit us Friday night. Check out the Shabbos table. They come in with this extra neshama. And then the last view here, it's when we eat and drink Friday night. Once you eat and drink, now you have this neshama yisera. Those answers may correspond to what the actual neshama is. We didn't get there yet. Right now, we're just entering the topic. And what we've said for those who just joined is that on Shabbos, there is something called neshama yisera. There is something called an extra soul, and it's legit. It's in the Gemara. So what is it? What exactly is this? So there's a school of thought that says this is an entirely rational concept. This is not mystical. This is not out there, but rather it's simply that Shabbos, you're not running around. You're not pursuing your job. You're not all the things that we don't do on Shabbos. And instead, you're eating and drinking and sitting at your table and reading. You're learning Torah. You feel better. That's all. Rabbi Shlomo ibn Aderet, also known as the Rashba, in source number 3, quotes this position. He has 2 responsa, which I referenced here, both of them saying the same thing. He says, I'm going to read out my English translation. You can see the authentic original Hebrew there as well. He says, and some explain that the extra soul is the rest and pleasure that the soul finds, as though there were an extra soul. And when it leaves him, when it leaves a person, he enters the days of strain and suffering. It is as though he has lost the extra soul, for he is weakened. So as far as this view goes, it's a very straightforward and rational thing. You enjoy Shabbos, you have a good feeling, that's like having an added soul. So quotes the Rashba. The Rashba himself is going to bring a more mystical view a little bit later, but that's the view he brings here. If I take that view, go back to source number 2, please, where he talked about the timing, and tell me, when is this soul likely to enter if it's simply a reaction to the enjoyment of Shabbos? When is it likely to enter? Based on this explanation.
During the meal.
During the meal, right. During the meal, right? This is when you're actually enjoying Shabbos. This is when you're eating and drinking. So that's when you'll have this feeling of, wow, things are good. And that's one view. However, the dominant view is that it's more supernatural. So that, take a look at source number 4, please. Rashi commenting on that Gemara about this extra neshama that shows up on Shabbos. We haven't gotten to why this is important for Pesach yet. Don't worry, we got some time. If you take a look at source number 4, Rashi says, you want to know what this extra soul is? Rochav leiv lemenucha ulesimcha. It is a breath of spirit, breath, B-R-E-A-D-T-H, breath of spirit, for rest, for joy, to be open wide, and he will eat and drink, and his spirit will not be revolted. You can eat, you can drink, and not be disgusted by just how much you're eating and drinking. So writes Rashi. Not exactly, so beautiful, exactly. You could eat and drink without being disgusted by how much you're eating and drinking. Nonetheless, that's the perspective that Rashi brings to it. I saw a note in the chat. I would have thought that it's when we light the candles that this extra soul comes, but that's not actually among the classic views that that are presented. It's very interesting. I definitely hear why one would think so, but that's not one of the views that I've seen brought. So Rashi tells us that it's not an extra soul, but it is something spiritual that broadens a person. And then they can eat and they can drink and they can enjoy. I wonder if this Rashi isn't where the idea that you can eat and drink and not gain weight on Shabbos came from. I wonder if that's not because Rashi, because of Rashi's language here. Nonetheless, it's not what he's saying. But this is a view that it is essentially physical, right? It is about physical enjoyment of the day. Now take a look at Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra in source number 5. Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra, who, as you can see there from the sheet, is roughly contemporary to Rashi, says no. He says it's intellectual, supernatural and intellectual. He says, Hashem kidesh zehayom, God sanctified this day and prepared it as a day for souls to receive extra wisdom, more than on other days. And therefore the text says, God blessed the day of Shabbos, and so on. It's about intellectual stimulation. You have added intellect on Shabbos. So now we have 3 different views already, right? You have the view the Rashba brought, which is that it's just you enjoy the day. That's all this extra soul is. Rashi, it's about physical pleasure on the day. Ibn Ezra, about intellectual perception. And then the Rashba actually brings a view, which I thought I brought here, but I see I skipped on the sheet, so I will tell it to you, in which he says that the soul reaches its own perfected state. He says each day of creation is paralleled every time that day of creation comes up in the week. So every Monday is like the first Monday of creation. Every Tuesday is like the first Tuesday of creation. So he says every Shabbos is like the first Shabbos of creation when everything is complete and reaches its apex. But last note in this section, take a look at source number 6, Ramban, Nachmanides. And he is the one who gives us the idea that an extra soul means what it sounds like. He says, Shabbos is a sign on the 7th day. The meaning is that the day is a sign. Shabbos is a sign for olam, for the world or for eternity. This is the meaning of the phrase, God halted, vayinafash, which we saw in source number 1, refers to this extra nefesh, this extra soul, the extra soul which comes from the foundation of olam, in whose hand are the souls of all who live. There is certain mysticism built into that, which we're not going to go into. But what Ramban suggests is that this is an actual extra soul that we gain on Shabbos. So we have a school of thought that says the neshamah yisera, this extra soul, is just the enjoyment we have of the day. That's simple, that's straightforward. We have a school of thought that says it's about physical pleasure and Hashem is giving it to us on Shabbos. We have a school of thought that says it's about intellectual insight, which Hashem is providing for us on Shabbos. We have a view that it is the soul reaching perfection, and we even have a view in source number 6 that it's actually an added nefesh. Either way, whether I take the rational, the supernatural, whether I take the spiritual, the physical, it requires some sensitization on our part in order to sense it. Whether it's the conscious relaxation of the Rashba and some of the others here, this relaxation, what I brought in the Rashba in source number 3, whether it's the supernatural benefits that are here on the sheet, it requires some sensitization on our part. But interestingly, it's not just a nice idea. It actually has ramifications in Jewish law. One example, there's a prayer we say Shabbos morning, Nishmat Kol Chai, right? Nishmat Kol Chai T'vei Shemcha. That prayer is a reference to the neshamah yisera, to the extra neshamah, which is why on Hoshana Rabbah, when we include all sorts of davening from Shabbos and Yom Tov, we don't say Nishmas Kol Chai because there's no neshamah yisera on Hoshana Rabbah. Another example, how many people here have been to a Sheva Brachos before? right? You've been to a Sheva Brachos? So Sheva Brachos is a set of 7 blessings that we say at the meal for the, in honor of the bride and groom in the week after the wedding, right? But it requires that we have somebody present who wasn't there before, who didn't eat with them before, who wasn't at the wedding, who wasn't at a previous meal. It's what we call in Hebrew panim chadashos. You have to have a new face. Somebody who wasn't there before has to be there in order for us to make Sheva Brachos, except not if it's Shabbos. If it's Shabbos, you don't need somebody who wasn't there before. Why? Says Rabbi Stern in the B'tzel HaChochma, because you have the neshamah Yisera. The extra soul of Shabbos is the panim chadashos. That's the new face. One other idea, which has very important elements for our shir, is the use of besamim when Shabbos ends. Tell me something. When Shabbos ends and we make Havdalah, why do we use a flame? Why do we use fire at Havdalah?
Creating Motzei Shabbos.
Don't we say that man discovered? I'm so sorry.
So, that's all right. But Chaim, what did you say?
The fire was created Motzei Shabbos.
So fire was created or given to human beings on the first Saturday night. Adam, aka Prometheus, gets fire on the first Saturday night. And so therefore, we use fire. That's one explanation. There's a second one. In order to show I wasn't allowed to use fire all Shabbos long, I wasn't allowed to manipulate fire. Now I am allowed to. What about besamim? Why do we have spices after Shabbos?
Because we lost every neshama.
Good. It's to help us cope with that come down after Shabbos. So we lose that neshama yisera, the extra neshama, so therefore use besamim. Okay, so far so good. What we've learned in the last 20 minutes is, aside from our initial rundown of 3 benefits of the current year's calendar for Pesach, right? The nap, the children asking questions, the chance to review the Haggadah before Yom Tov. Besides those things, what we've also learned is that there really is this concept of an extra soul, which may be just enjoyment of the day. It may be an extra soul. It may be something in between. It may be physical satisfaction, spiritual satisfaction, very unclear because we have conflicting sources. So now I want to go to the next step, which is, and here comes my second poll. There are only 2, so, this is it. And the second poll that I have for you is, does Yom Tov have a neshama yisera? Is there one for Yom Tov? It's an anonymous poll. Answer as you choose. You can say yes, you could say no, and you could say I am uncertain. I'll give people another 20 seconds because this is a fairly straightforward poll, and we're veterans now. We did the previous poll. The answers are coming in. 28, 29 answers so far. Very exciting. 30. You can see why I enjoy this toy. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll and sharing the results. We have 6 people saying yes, Yom Tov has an extra soul too. 16 saying no, it does not. And 10 saying I am uncertain. So the majority of the respondents certainly are in the no category. So now we have to understand why. Why would we have different views? The truth of the matter is that there are conflicting sources in this regard, but we have to understand how to look at them. Tell me something. For those who are in the majority, who said no, there's no extra soul on Yom Tov, what motivates you to say that?
Just from what we spoke about before, if we don't use besamim at Havdalah after Yom Tov.
Good. So Paul points out, if you take a look at source number 8, Tosfos, it's the Hebrew is the bottom of one side. My English translation is the top of the second side. I'm going to refer you to my English translation here. Shmuel gives the thumbs up. He's in Paul's camp. The Talmud does not mention spices for Havdalah between Shabbat and Yom Tov, meaning Shabbos into Yom Tov. So we're going to talk about that case of Shabbos leading into Yom Tov. But within this, there's a note within this Tosfos. I'm not going to read it out loud because it's going to lead to things I'm not ready for yet. But Tosfos makes the comment that if Yom Tov had an extra soul, we would use besamim for Havdalah when Yom Tov ends. And we don't do that. So clearly there's no extra soul. Any other reasons to say it?
Well, the whole source comes from the Gemara, and the Gemara doesn't talk about Yom Tov. So if that's really the source, then the Pesach is just the siman for it, not the siba.
Right. Logically, the Gemara only mentioned Shabbos. The Gemara didn't mention Yom Tov. Interestingly, though, when the sources discuss this question, no one points to the Gemara. I'm not clear on why. The Rashba gives me another answer for why there shouldn't be one on Yom Tov. It's in source number 9. He says, look, Shabbos, you'll tell me that there's an extra soul because we don't do work. But on Yom Tov, we're allowed to cook. We're allowed to prepare food. So therefore, we are working. So therefore, there's no neshamah yisera. You are indeed doing some work. So those are the no arguments. However, not everybody is on the same page. The Zohar, interestingly, I did not bring it on the sheet, but the Zohar actually argues that yes, Rosh Chodesh has an extra soul, Yom Tov has an extra soul. It isn't just the province of Shabbos. And the Rashbam, who was one of the authors of the Tosfot commentary to the Gemara, argued that yes, Yom Tov, of course, has an extra soul. And he says, I'll prove it to you. And this is embedded in source number 8. He says, when we make Havdalah, when Shabbos enters Yom Tov, right, what we're going to do the first night of Pesach at the Seder, right, we're going to do Kadesh, we're going to make Kiddush, we're going to include Havdalah in our Kiddush, right? That's what we're going to do. So there's an acronym that we use to remember the order of things for that Kiddush. Anybody know what the acronym is?
Yaknahaz.
Yaknahaz, excellent. Yaknahaz. Yayin, meaning you first make a Borei Pri Hagafen. Kiddush, Asher Bachar Banu, and all of that. Ner, Borei Ma'orei Ha'esh, the bracha on the fire. Havdalah, the blessing of Hamavdil. And then Zman, Shehechayanu. That's your acronym, Yaknahaz. If you can't remember that, that's okay. Your Haggadah has it in the right order. But the point is that we don't have besamim in there. We don't use spices when Shabbos leads into Yom Tov. Says Rashbam, Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, Rashi's grandson. He says, if you're going to tell me that Yom Tov does not have an extra soul, then you should have to include spices in your Havdalah after Shabbos leading into Yom Tov. And for that reason, many in fact side with the view of the Rashbam, that Yom Tov has an extra soul, and we say nishmas as part of davening on Yom Tov morning. That would seem to demonstrate that we believe this. But that leads to a question then. And here we go with the part that's going to start bringing us back to this Pesach. I realize that people thought they were here to talk about the Seder, and Torczyner hasn't mentioned the Seder yet. Don't worry, we're getting there. But here's our problem. You're telling me that Yom Tov has a neshamah yisera, has an extra soul. So why don't we use besamim when Yom Tov ends? After Yom Tov, when we make Havdalah, why don't we use besamim? In fact, there's a Yerushalmi that indicates we do use besamim, but we don't follow that Yerushalmi. So much for that idea. So some suggest maybe the come down from Yom Tov to the weekday isn't as great, as drastic as the come down from Shabbos to the weekday. You can make that argument. But I want to show you what Ramban says. Take a look at source number 10. This is the linchpin for everything that we're going to say. Ramban writes in a work called Ha'emunah ve'habitachon, Remez l'neshama yisera. This hints, what he's talking about there, he says, this hints to the extra soul that a person has on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And it does not leave on Chol HaMoed, or from after Yom Tov to mundane days, even though they are not Chol HaMoed. Therefore, we do not recite a blessing on spices after Yom Tov. Says Ramban, the extra soul of Shabbos ends, it says, see you later, be back in a week. The extra soul of Yom Tov doesn't go anywhere. It stays. It's with us now. The extra neshama of Yom Tov does not leave, says the Ramban. What do you think of that? Why would that be true, that the extra soul of Yom Tov would not leave us? Why should Yom Tov's extra soul be different from Shabbos' extra soul?
Is it something about the cyclical nature of Yom Tov that we build on it from year to year?
Well, that's a great idea. The idea that it's sort of an upward spiral where we're building each time. But why wouldn't Shabbos be the same way? Let's build through the week to the next Shabbos.
I think every Shabbos is a kind of a different opportunity, so I'm not sure that it serves the same. I've never heard that applied to Shabbos. I've heard it applied to Yom Tov, but not Shabbos.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Don't know.
Yeah. So Debbie writes in the chat, maybe we need the Yom Tov soul to get us through the week. In other words, we're going to use that Yom Tov soul year round when we don't have the Shabbos one. Plausible idea. Well, I want to show you an interesting idea here. And it comes from the Avnei Nezer, who was the first Sachachover Rebbe. It's recorded not by him, but by his son, who wrote the work Shem Mishmuel, he was the second Sachachover Rebbe. So the first Sachachover Rebbe was fascinating because he was a major halachic authority. His works that he's known for are primarily halachic works. But the idea that he expresses here is not a halachic idea so much. And what he suggests here, and it's quoted by his son, is that sanctity that we create is greater than that which is conferred upon us miraculously. When we create holiness, when we create Kedusha, that is greater than when God just makes us holy, when he confers holiness upon us. So for example, he says in source number 11, I'm going to condense it and say it outside, but I wanted you to have the original here as well. He says, the Jews prior to the golden calf are holy because they stood at Sinai, but that was something that was given to them. And they lost that when they made the golden calf. After the golden calf, when we do tshuva, when we repent, we are greater than we were before because now it's something that we did. I don't mean the calf, I mean the tshuva. We also did the calf. But the point is, when we generate the holiness ourselves, we are on a greater level, he says. And he says the same thing is true for the two sets of luchot, the two sets of tablets. The first set of tablets that Moshe gets, who made those? Sorry, Barbara, I see you talking, but you're muted.
God did.
Yeah, God made those. Thank you, Corinne. God made those. The second set of tablets, who made them?
Moshe wrote them.
Moshe made them. He didn't just write them. He doesn't write them. Hashem writes them. But Moshe chisels them.
Chiseled them.
Hashem says to Moshe,
God dictated.
Right? You're going to be the one who's going to shape the tablets. Says Rabbi Shmuel Bernstein, commenting on his father's idea. He says, the second luchos remain forever. They're buried now in the ark. Don't tell Indiana Jones. They're buried and they still radiate light where they are. The second set remain as luchos, as tablets of illumination, because they were created by us. It reminds me of an idea that I heard in the name of Rav Soloveitchik, a fascinating idea. There are two key mountains in Jewish history. What are the two mountains?
Har Moriah, Har Chorev.
Har HaMoriah and Har Chorev. Good. What happened on Har HaMoriah?
Beit HaMikdash.
Beis HaMikdash, first the Akedah, right, the binding of Isaac, and then the Beis HaMikdash is there. And the other one, Chorev, also known as noted in the chat as Sinai. What happened there?
Matan Torah.
Matan Torah, we got the Torah. What happens to Mount Sinai after we're done getting the Torah?
Goes back to mundane.
Goes back to being mundane. Bimshocha yovel hema yalu bahar. The shofar blows, and then everybody can go up on the mountain. Bring lunch, right? We don't even know where it is. I know some people think they do know where it is. Fine. As a kid, I read an article, I think in Olamenu, that had a rock that's found on Mount Sinai that every time you split it, you see a burning bush on the inside. They even had pictures. Totally true. Absolutely. We don't know where Har Sinai is. And frankly, from a halachic perspective, we don't care. Rosh Shlomo Goren claimed to know where Har Sinai was. He went up there and he wrote a Torah there. He completed writing a Torah there. But generally speaking, we assume we don't know. That's Har Sinai. Har HaMoriah, right, the Temple Mount where the Beis HaMikdash was, that remains holy. Says Rav Soloveitchik, why is it that one remains holy and the other does not? Because Har Sinai gets its sanctity from Hashem. That doesn't stay. Har HaMoriah gets its sanctity from us, from what Avram and Yitzchak did there, from what our ancestors did there, building a Beis HaMikdash. That is a sanctity that endures, that remains. You can make the same argument on a technical level in terms of the discussion in the Gemara about the initial Kedusha of the land of Israel, the initial sanctity when the Jews first enter with miracles under Yahushua, versus the second sanctity when they enter under Zerubbabel. The first time round, it's with miracles and God gives it to them, and it doesn't endure. The sanctity of the second time, though, that remains to this day. There's more to be said about this. But the point is, when we create sanctity, that remains. And so, says the Shem Mishmuel, quoting his father, take a look at source number 12, please. He says, the words of Ramban are known, because he read source number 10. He says, the words of Ramban are known that spices are not needed after Yom Tov as they are after Shabbos, because the extra spirit Israel merits on Yom Tov does not leave them after Yom Tov, as the extra soul leaves after Shabbos. This is why we recite the blessing on spices. And he says, my father, the Admor, explained, the Admor, the first Rebbe, explained how Yom Tov is different from Shabbos, because Shabbos is fixed. There is no human role in it. And after Shabbos, the extra soul leaves as well, for it came due to the sanctity of Shabbos. We don't create Shabbos. Shabbos happens every seventh day, with us or without us. But the rabbinical court sanctifies Yom Tov. Yom Tov depends on a calendar that is set by human beings. And there is a human role. And so the extra spirit that arises because of Yom Tov does not leave after Yom Tov. Because we create Yom Tov with our efforts, the sanctity remains. He goes on to note in source number 13, I didn't have room to present the translation here. I like the idea of finishing the source sheet on 2 pages, so I didn't go further with it. But he goes on to note that when you're dealing with Shabbos, how many days before Shabbos are associated with that Shabbos? The Gemara says it. How many days before Shabbos are considered part of the Shabbos?
6.
Nope.
Starts from Wednesday.
Wednesday, good. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days are considered part of the following Shabbos. There are certain interesting halachic ramifications of that. How many days before Yom Tov are we supposed to start preparing?
A month before, no?
30 days, right? There's some debate. Is that true for Shavuos? I mean, do you really need 30 days for Shavuos? For Pesach, some people will say, well, I need 3 months.
Well, for Shavuos, we have the full sphere to prepare.
That's true. Also, you have 49 days for Shavuos. That's fair. But the principle in the Gemara is Shloshim Yom Kodem Achag. 30 days before Yom Tov is when you prepare. That's what invests Yom Tov with a greater sanctity, and that's why we don't lose the spiritual boost that we gain on Yom Tov, and that's why I don't need Besamim when Yom Tov is over. So what we've said so far, again, let's make sure we understand, because there were a lot of moving parts here, and I don't want to lose anything.
Rabbi, there's a greater sanctity, but you're allowed to carry and you're allowed to cook, so it's less malachas.
Correct.
So
Less
Shabbos, and also aliyahs. There's 7 aliyahs on Shabbos and 6 on Yom Tov.
Correct. This is not a statement about Yom Tov having greater holiness than Shabbos. Shabbos takes the cake in that regard, so to speak.
Okay.
But on Yom Tov, you can bake it. It's true that Shabbos has greater sanctity, but the spirit that we get, this neshamah yesera that we get, that remains past Yom Tov. Yes, Barbara.
If the extra soul arrives before Yom Tov and doesn't leave us, does that mean it's always with us? Or do we then get an extra one when the next Yom Tov comes?
So that's something that I was wondering about, and I can't find anyone who addresses it clearly. The question of whether it's there till Pesach, and then you get a new one, or whether it stays with you in the same way that if you have leftover matzah from last year, it's just going to keep on accruing, and you'll have 2 years and then 3 years, like the Israeli source. They're selling you matzah now. They have matzah available from 2018. They don't look at that. It's pre-COVID matzah. So it's an interesting concept.
We want to return to that much nicer world.
Yes. So Debbie asks in the chat, How does it manifest? What does this soul do? And that's exactly what we were trying to show with that issue with the sources before. One view is Rashi's view. It enables you to have physical pleasure of the day without feeling revolted. Ibn Ezra says, no, it's about your intellectual perception. You will understand Judaism. You will understand Torah more because of it. Or we had the idea that it's actually, as Ramban said, an extra neshamah. It's an extra soul, an extra spiritual sensitivity, some suggest. That's what we have. We get it on Shabbos and then we lose it. And we say, we use the besamim, the spices after Shabbos because of that. Yom Tov, we gain it and we don't lose it. It remains with us. And that's why we don't use besamim after Yom Tov, and potentially why we don't use besamim from Shabbos going into Yom Tov, because we're going to have an extra neshama. Well, this brings me to Pesach. First of all, if preparation earns a more enduring neshama yisera, a more enduring extra soul, then every Pesach has to have the greatest possible neshama yisera, because there's no holiday that requires more preparation than Pesach. But in a normal year, how are we supposed to feel it at the Seder? We're exhausted from all of that preparation. Yay, Ra, yay me, we prepared, and therefore we have extra spirituality. Wake me up so I can enjoy it, right? Whether the neshama yisera is a rational product of the rest that's going on that day, right? Like we saw the idea in the Rashba, or a supernatural spiritual boon sent from God, necessarily the pre-Pesach tension and exhaustion must dull the experience when Yom Tov begins. In a normal year, I'm with Debbie in the chat. How does this manifest? At the Seder? The first night when I'm tired? It's a hard time to feel it. But then you get to our calendar. Shabbos is Erev Pesach. We make all of our Seder preparations in advance. Before Shabbos, Erev Pesach, everything is done. You can even set the table for your Seder if you're going to eat at a different table on Shabbos. You know, you can have everything set. Then, as we noted before, on Shabbos itself, you get that rejuvenating nap. And more than that, we have a day of neshama yisera in advance. We have a lead day of that spiritual benefit, a lead day of what Ibn Ezra called the intellectual benefit, a lead day of what the Rashba quoted as simply the enjoyment of having this day. Whether rational or supernatural doesn't matter. We have an extra day to help heighten our sensitivity as we prepare the Haggadah on Shabbos afternoon. And when we say in Marav that night, the bracha of Vatodienu, or when we say the Hamavdil as part of Kiddush that night at the Seder, we say that God is Mavdil bein Kodesh LaKodesh, from one sanctity to another. We scaffold the Yom Tov experience on the Shabbos experience. You follow? It's not as though this is a regular Seder. This is, as I put it on the flyer, an uncommon evening. This is not your normal opportunity. This year is a special opportunity. We need to use it. We need to work on it. We need to work on this uncommon experience, having Shabbos lead into Yom Tov, to view it not as, oh no, Erev Pesach is Shabbos, but oh yes, Erev Pesach is Shabbos. I'm going to rest on Shabbos, like the Rashba said. I'm going to eat and drink and enjoy the day, as Rashi said. Maybe a little bit of a different schedule because of the whole Shabbos Erev Pesach thing, fine. But I'm going to eat and drink and enjoy the day. Maybe I'll even have that sense of the extra soul, actual extra soul that Ramban explained. I'm going to connect spiritually and intellectually, as Ibn Ezra explained it, especially when I read the Haggadah on Shabbos afternoon. And the result is to be able to enter that Saturday night Seder prepared for an unprecedented and awesome experience. Instead of being afraid of this year's schedule, I think we can embrace this year's schedule and use it to create for ourselves truly a Seder like no other. So thank you very much. I'm going to stick around to answer questions if people have questions and comments. But I think that we should really think this through and see it in the positive way that Ramban portrays, that the Shem Mishmuel portrays. I see a question asked of me in the chat: if Shabbos occurs within Yom Tov, when Shabbos and Yom Tov are the same, like happens in the last days of Pesach, do you keep two souls? So I think no. I think you gain a Shabbos soul and a Yom Tov soul. Shabbos for that day, and Yom Tov is going to, Shabbos for that day, and Yom Tov is the one that will stay with you. Unless what you meant is, are you getting to, in which case I think the answer is probably yes. I think so. But that's the way I understand this. I have to admit, using the word understand and mystical in the same sentence is hard. But to the extent that I understand it, this is what I understand. Questions, comments? I see that I got, oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. All right, then. Thank you very much, everybody. And I wish you a good Shabbos in advance, a Chag Kasher v'Sameach in advance. And everybody should come through all the preparations intact, God willing, healthy and happy. Yes, Corinne?
No, thank you. Just Yasher Koach. Thank you.
Rabbi.
Rabbi, very nice.
Yasher Koach.
Thank you.